very easy to allow hatred to even take over in our hearts. On the 28th of June 2008, it was a Sunday, and we went off to church. And we came back from church, and Mike and Angela, my parents-in-law, had lunch with us. And then they went back to their house. And I heard on our radio network that a gang was moving around, and it was causing mayhem on various farms around. And that the next place that they were due to come to was our farm. And I tried to call Mike on the radio, and he didn't answer. And I knew that his radio was on the blink. I couldn't get him on the phone, so I quickly jumped in the car and drove over to the other side of the farm, about 2 k's away, to go and find what was happening over there and try to warn him of the impending invasion that was about to take place. Well, as I came around the corner, I was greeted by 2 men with rifles pointing directly at my head, and I ducked down underneath the windscreen and came to a halt very quickly, thrust my car into reverse and reversed, went forward again, and was just getting out of the situation when a big rock came through my side window, where another guy obviously had been, smashed into my head. And I went down on the seat, and before I knew it, there were strong arms that were dragging me out, incredibly strong arms. And I was then stripped, and they started beating me over the head with their rifle butts, and then dragged me, my father-in-law's weapons as well. So they had well over 20 guns between them, and these were being shot off with gay abandon. And it was an incredibly dangerous and difficult situation. But the amazing thing was, I had no fear within this situation. God somehow completely took away any kind of fear. We were then loaded up into the back of one of Mike's vehicles and taken off. And I was desperately trying to see where we were going, but Mike and I were laying down in the back, and all we could really see was the tops of the trees, and I was just trying to recognize where we were being taken. And meantime, there were guns pointing out of the windows and shots going off all the time as they were trying to shoot my brother-in-law, who was trailing us on his own with all these guys shooting at him. We were eventually taken off to a place on the other side of Sugutu, it's a mine area, where this particular gang had a indoctrination camp for the elections in 2008. And it was just populated with all these youth, young guys, kind of 15, 16-year-old guys, people that had been taken away from their homes, taken away from their families, taken away from their schools, and put through the program to ensure that the people were brought into a state of fear. And it was an incredibly dark situation. There was no moon that night, and it was incredibly cold. There was frost that night, and as I said, we had been stripped. They poured cold water all over us, and we were shivering in the dust. And I didn't really know what was going to happen that night at all. You know, I didn't know whether we would live or whether we would die. You know, a lot of them were smoking mbanji. A lot of them had been drinking. Mugabe had just been sworn back into power again that afternoon. And so there was festivities taking place. And we were lying, shivering in the dust. I was in and out of consciousness a bit. I'd got quite a badly fractured skull by that stage and quite a few broken ribs. And tied up incredibly tightly. At one stage I actually managed to pick up the knots and untie myself, and I thought that I could probably make my break. You know, it was a very dark night. There was a lot of bush all around. A lot of these guys were not particularly in their right senses, and I reckon that I could probably make the break. But then I realized that they would just shoot my parents-in-law if I did that. And when they found that I'd untied myself, they then really gave me a thorough beating. They had shambox and they were just beating the soles of my feet, picking me up and just beating the soles of my feet. And it was incredibly painful, particularly with the broken ribs, and my head was very sore. And I was just crying out as they were beating the soles of my feet. I was just crying out, Jesus, Jesus, Jesus. It was just so incredibly painful. And I prayed to God at that time. I said, Father, if you want me tonight, then I'm ready. I'm completely ready. I'm not afraid of what these people are doing to me. I know where I'm going. I'm ready. But I said, if there's still stuff for me to do down here, then I'm also ready. And then they left me for a while and I was lying on the ground. And then this most amazing thing happened. A real defining moment, I believe, in my life took place as I was lying there in the ground, on the ground. And at that stage, Angela, my mother-in-law, had a burning stick thrust into her mouth. And it was really pretty nasty. And I was lying there on the ground, and suddenly that verse I think that every one of us find very difficult. That verse from the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, love your enemies. How do you love people that are doing this sort of thing to you, to your mother-in-law, who I love very, very dearly, to my father-in-law? How do you love people that are doing this sort of thing? How do you love people that have murdered your friends? How do you love people that have taken everything from so many of our friends, who have broken families, who have split communities, who have destroyed so much that has been built up over generations of hard work by so many people in this country? And I'd always known that Jesus was right. But how physically can you love when these things are happening? And it was almost like something physical when that verse came to me. Love your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. Pray for them. And it was a spontaneous reaction. All these young guys all around me, looking down at me, in the darkness. And I reached out. My hands were so tightly tied, I can even feel the tingling to this day from a little bit of nerve damage or whatever it is. And I just reached out with my bound hands to the first pair of legs. And I said, "May the Lord Jesus bless you." And then to the second, "May the Lord Jesus bless you." And then to the next one, "May the Lord Jesus bless you." And for me, it was something incredibly freeing that took place that night. Although my hands were still bound, although my feet were still bound, my heart was free. I had no hatred, I had no bitterness in my heart for what was taking place. And I believe that it was just a little bit, a little taste of the grace that the Lord Jesus has bestowed upon each one of us, upon me, that touched me that night.